Materials processing class. This is Mr. Voigt. I'm here to go over the safety protocol and procedures for the bandsaw. First thing, obviously, like most pieces of machinery, you have a table, and that's where you're going to rest your work. I have a fence on this, so there are times when you will run a piece down the fence. There's also a groove in this table, just like on the table saw that we can run a miter gauge down. Has to be a miter gauge made for this because it can't be the same size as on the table saw. It would run into the blade. So those, you can use those, but often on the bandsaw, you're what we call freehand cutting. So you're going to put a piece of lumber on here, and you're going to push it through the blade. If you get closer than 6 inches to this blade, and you need to be careful, if you get closer than a couple inches, you need to be using a push stick to help you push it through. So anytime you're going to get really close to the blade, you want to use a push stick, just like on any other piece of equipment. If you're going to cut really tight arcs, the width of the blade makes a big difference. This is a 1/4 inch blade. They come an inch or wider, and the wider the blade, the bigger the arc you have to cut with it. The thinner the blade, the tighter the arc you can cut. All right? And the teeth on these blades are always going to be pointing towards the table because it spins coming down towards the table. Just like any saw, those teeth are going to impact the lumber and push it into the table to cut it. Otherwise, I'd have to hold on all the equipment. I'd have to hold everything down tight as those teeth came up through the wood, and that isn't safe. So they're always going to impact the wood, pushing it down into the table and into a fence. So that's the same on here. And on this, it turns on these wheels. I have this unplugged right now, like you always should when you're working on any kind of equipment and putting your hands near what cuts. The blade has to ride in the middle of this wheel, and there's an adjustment on the other side of this, but the way you check it is by looking at it, and if you adjust it, it'll move that blade, it'll tilt this blade one way or the other, and it'll help move that blade to the center or out to the edge. And you want it in the center so that it doesn't come off if there's a little bit of pressure put on it. But anyway, you check to make sure it's in the middle by spinning it with your hand. You don't want to turn it on if it's on the edge, it might fly off. So they want you to do this. Now make sure it's unplugged. And then you'd make the adjustment and you'd turn it again, and you'd see it walk its way back and forth if you move that adjustment. So that's a question on the test. I don't want us doing that. Come get me if there's any adjustments that need to be made. I don't want us doing that, but the question on the test is you move it with your hand. And again, it's gonna spin this way so the teeth that are facing down are passing down through the wood. It's not gonna move the other way. Okay. I'm just have a few notes here. We also are gonna take a piece, and if I'm gonna put an arc on a piece of wood, something like that, I don't know if you can see that very well. Before I cut that arc using my bandsaw, I'm going to cut some straight lines from my edges down. These are called relief cuts. So before I put it up here and freehand cut, I would move it through here. I would cut these relief cuts. And then when I get to this point on my arc, this piece right here would fall. And then it wouldn't then be able to twist my blade as I go around the corner. And then this piece would fall after I get to this relief cut. And this piece would fall when I get to this relief cut. Okay? So as I'm pushing it through freehand, I don't have binding on my blade. Also, I'm never going to push anything through with my fingers right in front of that blade, because if I happen to slip, which does happen sometimes, then I'm not going to hit the blade. Okay? I'm also going to adjust my guard down to between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch off my work, just like the distance on the table saw that you put the blade above your work, 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch above my work. That way I'm protected from that blade if I happen to get my hand in there. Again, if I get really close, I want to push it through with the push stick, which we will always have sitting here as well. Okay? One type of wood you do not want to cut on here is anything round. We can cut things round in here, but we have to take special precautions. And as a safest rule, You don't cut round stock on most of these saws without special precautions. So on the safety tests, which are safest practice, you don't cut round stock. All right. Also, they're also going to talk about, like on all equipment, you don't want to reach over or get unbalanced. So you don't want to be pushing something and get out of balance. So they're going to ask you to keep your balance. All the PPEs that we wear on all the saws, or using all the equipment, apply to this as well. A couple other things. If I'm using this and I have to push real hard, it probably indicates that my blade is dull. If I happen to hear a rhythmic clicking sound, that often indicates that I have a crack in my blade. And so either one of those, you want to come get me. You want to stop cutting, you want to come get me, and we'll check it and make sure that it's okay. If it happens to break, these blades, if I twist it too much, if I don't make enough relief cuts, or it's just old and it breaks, or we have too much tension on it, then you are to first, if you can, hit the stop button and then just step away and let everything stop moving before we come and look at it. If it's flapping around, which I've never seen happen, but I suppose if it broke, it could flap a little bit. If it's doing that, then obviously you're going to step away first and you're going to go try to unplug it or cut the power another way. I've never seen that happen. It usually just comes off the wheel or breaks and stays in these covers. But if it does, don't try to get in there with something moving that could hurt you. We'll cut the power either at the breaker or we'll unplug it. Usually you can just hit the power here. And finally, if I'm cutting and I want to back out of a cut because I need to restart, or I'm not going to cut all the way through, I need the safest practice is to turn it off, let the blade stop moving, then back it out. Now there are times when we may not follow that rule to the letter, but most of the time that's what you want to be doing. Okay? And then finally, if there's scraps at the end, you want to turn it off and you want to let it come all the way to a stop before you get those scraps away from that blade. Even if you're in the middle of a cut, turn it off, get the scraps away, and then resume cutting. That's it, and stay safe on the bandsaw.